Thank you very much, Frank. Any other responses to any of the issues that have been raised? Thank you very much.
I teach chemistry, and I have come across a lot of simulation and applets. And I think when you talk about creativity, once I attempted to make an applet, and I ended up wasting a lot of time making that applet. So I think when you talk about creativity, it depends, you know, what exactly are you referring to by creativity? Because I said to myself, I wanted to be creative. And why should I depend on someone else's applet? And this was 6-7 years ago. So I think it depends how far you want to go with this extent of reusability or creativity. So I'm in favor of pick what you want. So I agree with Martin. And then I'm with Frank's team. Use as much as you can. And coming to Elizabeth Fong's point, reuse, even once, it's done. You don't have to go on reusing it. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Any other comments in response to that? Thank you, Vili. Could I have the microphone to Vili? Thanks very much.
I think I'll just continue with a comment that I made yesterday regarding the deschooling effect of open resources. I got this idea from a project that I was engaged in last year on laptop, OLPC, one laptop per child. And that idea came up, and I thought I gave it a lot of thought, and then through this week, it's the one laptop per child project. It's about access to a laptop. It's about access to open resources. And when I came into this, listening to these discussions, the ideas are beautiful, but that's a concern that that pops up, pops back to mind. Whether it's going, there will be a deschooling effect of this on the traditional school. I'm not a traditionalist. I'm a constructivist. I'm a futurist. I like looking forward, and I'm positive about changes. But what I'm concerned about is that if things falling out or getting out of hand. Because I see the resources. I like open resources which are free and cheap, and students have access to. But this should be our students especially here in the Pacific should have access to things within the boundary of the curriculum. We still need our students to come to the classroom and listen to their teachers in their schools. When resources are readily available, cheaply, and especially when students have computers in their own home with their own internet access, I see that as a negative impact on traditional education in not only here but everywhere else. Students will tend to stay home because they have access to everything. It's just a comment.
Thank you, Vili. That's a bit of a challenge. Any responses to that? Would anyone like to respond to? Thank you, Mum.
Yes, I think this is another example of sometimes where we have confused thinking, just like Frank said. Because when we talk of OER, I think I've changed sides just for
just as well the judges have gone.
When we talk of OER, basically, we tend to confuse the two things. The use of OER as teaching material by the teacher and the use of OER as self-learning materials. So these are two different things. So a student, so anyone who has access to the internet, has access to an OER repository, can have access to some material for learning by himself on like YouTube, anything, where you have some resources which are free and you can learn anything from there. So this is an example of self-learning. And then you can, if you have such access, you can feel that there is no use for you to go in a formal classroom to learn that specific idea. But when we talk of OER as teaching materials or teaching resources, which means a lecturer can go on the internet, look for these resources, download them, package them on CD, and then use them in the classroom to demonstrate to the students as additional resources. which in that case he should not have gone and make it themselves. For example, that's an applet. So if you are a chemistry teacher, you want to do an applet, possibly you need to know programming, Java, advanced programming, and so on, which is very difficult to do. So once you get an applet which meets your criteria and so on, you can just download it or run it in the classroom to demonstrate it to the student. For instance, if you want to demonstrate braking distance in physics and so on. So these are the two elements. So it's not necessary that when you use OER as a teacher, it will have that anti-schooling effect. It depends if all your students have access to the internet, very rapid bandwidth and so on, then they might think that why is the need to come to class when I can get these resources elsewhere? So we need to differentiate between these two aspects.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. And
Traitor, Mohammed. I think
just in time.
Billy raised used an interesting word, which is control. A friend of mine, Brian Lamb, says he likes technology that's cheap, fast, and out of control. And that's a kind of lot of this lightweight Web 2 stuff. And Jonathan Zittrain wrote a very good book called The Future of the Internet, and he said that the reason the Internet is such a fabulous thing is because it's generative, so it has unpredicted outcomes. You don't control the system, you let people produce unpredicted outcomes. And I think all that stuff, I agree with both those things, like cheap, fast, and out of control technology is the good stuff, and you want a generative system. And I think OERs, as they're kind of constituted in higher education currently, are about trying to control, so they're not generative at all. They're saying, this is what you do, and this is how you use it, rather than this kind of much more lightweight, kind of free approach. So I think they're kind of counterintuitive, I think, to what we might want to do with the net.
Thank you very much, Martin. Could I have one final comment, please? I think that there's still a little bit of discussion about with the judges, so if we could just keep the discussion going for a little bit longer, I'm sure that we've almost earned our morning tea. Are there any more final comments? Okay. Thank you very much, colleagues. And I think the judges are ready, so I will hand over to Aidan. Aidan, if you want to step over to the podium, please. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much.
Did come to it all. We talked about how everybody was and actually came to some significant agreement, both about the result and sort of the reasons for that result. Of course, the result has to come at the end, so we'll just waste your time with some of the reasons. So looking at, just briefly going through, the first affirmative speaker, Frank, was of course very clear and very sort of persuasive. And the reply was very sort of clear and simple and persuasive. So certainly there's sort of points for style there. First negative speaker was probably a little less persuasive, certainly demonstrating a sort of an internal discomfort with being on the wrong team, which you're not really as a professional debater supposed to be revealing. So that probably wasn't strategically all that good. That's right. But other than that, it certainly gave us a lot of content in terms of the sort of the list of things. The reply was probably slightly stronger, maybe getting a little bit angrier as it went along or something, and gathering a little bit more steam. So particularly, I think, by the reply, you were crystallising this point of saying, well, hang on, something important here is we need to distinguish between everything else on the web and what we really call OERs, which I thought was the beginning of sort of a kind of a strategy that was putting some distance between the teams. The second affirmative speaker gave us a lot of examples of OER projects. And one of the things we thought with a number of the speakers, this applies to a few, was that there was a lot of rhetorical debate but not always a lot of data and evidence. And we were told at the beginning that the use of data and evidence was a significant criteria. So we did bear that in mind. And so particularly when we got to the second negative speaker, we were impressed. That was probably the high point of the use of data and evidence. We started to hear statistics and percentages and these things that I know my learned colleagues on the bench were very pleased to hear, particularly I think coming from the sciences as well. I mean, being a lawyer I can deal with rhetoric, but that certainly was pressing us according to the criteria to hear that come across. So there was a strong empiric performance by the second negative. So similar things getting to the third affirmative speaker, again, sort of dealing very much with the specific concerns, but again, I suppose that criticism that, which we have really nearly all the other speakers, that it was sort of mostly rhetorical rather than fighting it on the data, which sort of suggests maybe that you had other things to do during the last week and a half. And finally, Mohammed certainly went in for the attacking, did a very, very point-by-point attack, perhaps not with lots of data, but certainly with some enthusiasm. So where we get to when we add all that up and we take into account the various bribes that we've been offered overnight, for the first judge, and we don't tell you which judge it is, okay, in case you move us to the other side of the island to run court over there for a few years. So the first judge, 36 for the affirmative team and 38 for the negative team. For the second judge, 35 for the affirmative team and 40 for the negative team. And for the third judge, who was very unhappy with not really getting good enough bribes at all, 40 for both teams. So that gives us 111 for the affirmative team, despite their sort of assurance that it was a walkover, and 118 for the negative team. So congratulations.
We just have a few tokens of our appreciation for the efforts of both teams. So the first prize, being the Vaka, goes to the negative team over here, Professor Martin Weller. Thank you very much. Ms. Elia Grant-Fraser, thank you. And Mr. Mohammed Santali, thank you very much. Actually, they do in these parcels, just in case they don't have internet connection. And that, colleagues, concludes our debate this morning. I do have to say a very big thank you very much to you as our colleagues attending. Without you, this would not have been the event that it was. I thank the judges again, Aidan, Gurmit, and Dr. Bibia. Thank you very much for taking time out and for agreeing to come and do this. It is not an easy job. So thank you from the team, and thank you also to the SideCAP project Final Dissemination Event Secretariat for setting us up so quickly last night. I've noticed most of you might have noticed have been here earlier. The format was a little different. We need a little bit of a makeover, and that was done very quickly and efficiently for us last night.